This was the second attempt in your life in under 2 months. What do you make of that?
Well, there's a lot of rhetoric going on. A lot of people think that the Democrats, when they talk about threat to democracy and all of this, and it seems that both of these people were radical lefts.
Donald Trump breaking his silence to say who he blames for the latest assassination attempt. A message echoed, by the way, by his allies.
No one has tried to kill Kamala Harris in the last couple of months, and 2 people now have tried to kill Donald Trump in the last couple of months. I'd say that's pretty strong evidence that the left needs to tone down the rhetoric.
It was President Biden who made the comment that it is time to put Trump in the bullseye. This is the type of dangerous rhetoric that has led to this type of thing.
Somebody needs to step to the plate and at least act like you care about a Republican candidate, but they truly don't.
I want to bring in former Washington, D.C. Chief of Homeland Security and Intelligence, Danelle Harvin, CNN political analyst Olin Kano-Youngs, and CNN political commentator David Urban. Also here, Democratic strategist Chuck Rocha. Glad to have all of you here. Chuck, let me begin with you because you see the finger pointing already. We've all heard about this word rhetoric. It's being used all throughout the day and frankly for quite some time now. What is your response to the accusation that rhetoric has caused what's happened?
You know, I've been thinking about this a long time. And this morning when I woke up, I was reflecting back on, I've been doing this a long time. And I've always made attack ads against Republicans. And I've said some pretty ugly things that are on me as a guy who makes ads. That's what I do for a living. But what's really started to see something change was the internet. I'm not blaming the internet. I'm just saying misinformation and ugliness. Everybody's got a little ugly in them. And when you put them on the internet, it just exposed to a lot of things that a lot of people are saying, maybe not tied to Donald Trump or even tied to the vice president. They're just for folks that are just going through their regular day lives, who are just kind of getting off the edges of the internet and just seeing enough until their baby starts crying again. They may believe some of this stuff that's really, really ugly that's out there. And I think all of that is really the difference in what's happening today than when I was making an ugly ad back in the 80s or 90s, which is the same ads, but the internet's what's really changed a lot of this.
David, you're nodding. You agree?
Yeah, look, I mean, as to who's to blame, right? In terms of, you know, the people to blame are the people who pull the trigger, the people who are laying in wait in the bushes. You know, my mom used to say, you know, you're responsible for your own actions, no one else. And I think that's true today. These people who are the, you know, the would-be assassins, both the would-be assassins are obviously have mental illness. I don't think they're ascribed to any political philosophy. But then again, I hold that same view as to the folks that stormed the Capitol on January 6th. I don't blame Donald Trump, you know, for that action either. Those people, they're grown men and women. They're responsible for their actions. They're responsible for breaking windows and knocking police in the head, the same way that these people are responsible for their actions, laying on a rooftop in Butler, hiding in the bushes in West Palm. You know, so everybody needs to dial back the political rhetoric. I think it needs to tone down, and you know, everybody's like, "Well, I'll do it when you do it." Somebody's got to be first. Someone's got to be the first one to do it. I'm not sure how that gets accomplished, but look, Trump's got a right to blow off a little steam, be a little PO'd, right? He just like literally within, you know, he's going for the Gerald Ford record of 17 days, but you know, 2 people just tried to take his life, and then 30 days. Pretty amazing.
Well, by the way, he talked about and said earlier, I'm quoting here, he could use inflammatory language too, far better than they can, he says, but I don't. But here's a clip of what he said in front of tens of millions of viewers just, last week, not even a week ago.
She has destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. If she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success.
And then, by the way, there is the social media, Elon Musk, who put on X, and no one is even trying to assassinate Biden Kamala. And they had a thinking face emoji. You also heard Senator J.D. Vance, Olin, talking about this and suggesting, well, no one's trying to harm Kamala or Biden. The idea of rhetoric is going to play, but also the idea of retaliation can be a real concern. If people believe that somebody is to blame, unlike what David's talking about, then that could have as dire consequences.
This is something that I've been hearing from Homeland Security officials, federal law enforcement officials for really some time now, beyond just this year. And that's that the fear of political violence becoming sort of the new normal. us getting used to one political act motivated by rhetoric and then retaliated against as well. Just in 2021, DHS warned about violence rising and being tied to politics. Just last year, the Homeland Security Department released another report warning specifically about this election as well, and violent acts being perpetrated around this election. It seems like we're starting to see this more and more. Let's remember, we're not just talking about 2 attempted assassinations here against the former president. We're also at a time where members of Congress are taking funding away from their campaign and trying to get private security to protect themselves amid a rise of threats against public officials as well. It's becoming too normal now, and what was long feared seems to be becoming the reality.
We talked about this in the past. I mean, you and I have had many a conversation now about, the idea of political motivation or violence being the real threat in the United States at this point, which for many people makes the country unrecognizable at that point. When you see all that's happening and you hear the conversations, what is going through your mind as to how they're going to be proactive to stop it and also effectively reactive to know the cause and cure?
All these things are symptoms, right?
Yeah.
The patient is sick, and we've talked about this over the last year. The patient is sick because a lot of individuals think that political violence is not only acceptable, but can be rewarded. Let's go back to the fact that Donald Trump and many people on the right call the J6 rioters that are sitting in jail patriots and political prisoners. And so when you're sitting behind bars, you're giving these people that type of platform, it shows that it pays. I also think that the fact of the matter is you don't need a political ideology to do some of the things we've seen.
Yeah.
Some of these people are just plain nut jobs. And so I think since we don't know the actual motive of the shooter, this would-be shooter potentially from this weekend, we'll find out more. But I think that to your point, you remember just days after the Pennsylvania incident, DHS put out a bulletin about retaliation. So I think we're going to see more of that.
Like Chuck said too, what things have changed dramatically is the internet and social media. The velocity at which this stuff travels is almost instantaneous, right?
It's even more than that because I can't make an ad. Folks at home should know this. I'm an ad maker. I can't say that my Republican that I'm running against is doing this, this, and this, or that they are stealing babies, that they're doing whatever the worst thing in the world is. The law won't allow me to do that because I can be sued. The television commercials, TV that own the TV commercials, won't allow me to put that on TV because lawyers have to look at an ad before it goes up so nobody gets sued. That don't matter on the internet.
And I was going to say also, remember that our adversaries want to see this all happen. They love it, right? What do you think the Russians, the Chinese, the IRGC, the Iranians, they love this. You heard Governor DeWine today saying that these bomb threats, a majority of them originated from overseas, right? So our adversaries love to see this. And it's just a little drop of pebble in a pond and you watch the ripples go out. And that's what's happening here, I think, to a large extent. And we need to be very, very aware of that as we look forward and cast aspersions on each other. It may not be a Democrat or Republican, maybe the CCP or the IRGC.
I also, when you hear about rhetoric, yes, rhetoric is maybe part of the story, but we're also talking about normalizing or being desensitized to gun violence. I mean, we have had school shootings, there have been mass shootings, we've got violence all across this country, and now even twice, the former president of the United States having had an assassination attempt. And this is the point that former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords actually made in her op-ed today, and I'm going to quote a little bit for it. She said, but the through line here isn't former President Trump. The through line isn't the Secret Service. The through line isn't heated rhetoric. The through line is, as it always was, the guns. Zolan, this is the overarching conversation about the prevalence of guns in this country, about how people have been desensitized, and that the conversation about rhetoric, I think, can become the equivalent of thoughts and prayers and not focusing on the additional issues that it raises.
And the failure to pass gun legislation, when you talk to many members of Congress, advocates as well, survivors of gun shootings, also speaks to the divisive nature of our politics. The fact that you can continue to have violent acts like this carried out, but members of Congress also can't come together to pass reasonable solutions, that's something I hear a lot from advocacy groups, from voters themselves, almost as a prime example of sort of the dysfunction of Congress as well.
An obliterated gun serial number, though. Tell me about why that's so significant, even if you have laws to protect.
Well, I mean, clearly this individual either bought it from someone who didn't want to be traced back to them, or didn't want the gun be traced back to him. And so, I mean, but I think that, well, once again, not getting ahead of the investigation, that not doesn't necessarily point to anything other than the fact that, this individual was able to get a gun, go cross-border state borders, and set up shop. I think that, at the end of the day, the proliferation of guns, we have 450 million guns for everybody. This is a never-ending conversation that we're having. I think that
It's also, but also, let me just kind of counter that with, I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, home of the deer hunter, right? People didn't go to school when it's first day of deer season. I grew up guns laying around, which today, by today's standards, would be unacceptable. Nobody shot their parents. Nobody went to school, shot people up. What's changed in society that kids now feel like they can walk into school and shoot their classmates up, or that somebody can pick up a gun and commit a mass shooting? What has changed in society? Guns have been around this country for a really long time. People have had access to guns, probably more access to guns in the past than there are today. Easier in your neighborhood kind of thing, right? But there's more gun violence.
Well,
What's the issue? The root cause, I think, is much more important to get at than the guns. The cause of all the craziness, I'm not quite sure what it is.
if I had the answer to that question, we'd be sitting here talking about records being broken by Asia Wilson and Caitlin Clark tonight, as opposed to a second assassination attempt of a former American president. Thank you, everyone.